to tonight's council meeting. I'll now call upon Councillor Thompson to read the councillor prayer, and if people would like to stand, if they would like to.
Almighty God, we humbly seek your blessings upon this council. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the city of Boroondara. Amen.
Thank you, and I now ask Councillor Hollingsworth to read the Acknowledgement of Country.
I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be listening this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So welcome everyone to tonight's council meeting. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thanks everyone. The meeting is being live streamed on the council website, so you'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. And the meeting is also being recorded and will be made available on the council website as soon as practicable after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered during the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting may be postponed. My name is Councillor Jane Addis and I'm Mayor of the Boroondara City Council. And I'll start now by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. So seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Nick Stavrou, our Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wes Gold, then Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and then from this side around on the other side, we have Councillor Victor Franco, Councillor Susan Bigger, Councillor Gary Thompson, Councillor Di Gillies and Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth. Officers in attendance tonight, Philip Storer, our Chief Executive Officer, Carolyn McLean, Director Community Support, Marianne Palatsides, Acting Director Places and Spaces, Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer, Mance Bassi, Director Customer and Transformation, and Scott Walker, Director Urban Living. And we also have Brian Wee, Manager Governance and Legal, and Elizabeth Manu, Senior Governance Officer. There will also be a number of other officers in attendance this evening, and they'll be introduced as they present their reports. The first item is apologies. Mr Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no apologies this evening.
Thank you, Mr Wee. Adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on 22nd August 2022. Can I have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? I think Councillor Hollingsworth, you happy to?
I had my light on first. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, did you? It's up on the screen as Councillor Hollingsworth, but look...
Sorry, look, I actually just wanted to ask a question with regard to the minutes.
Yep. Yes, please do.
Thank you. I've just observed through review that with regard to a motion put by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Bigger to do with weed management control, there was a division
Could you just move the mic? Sorry, we're having trouble hearing.
There was a division called with a motion put by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Bigger, and with the results of the division, yourself as the Mayor has been listed twice as against the motion. So I just wanted to bring the correction needs to be recorded there.
Oh, thank you.
It's on page 17 of the report. Thank you.
And you're happy for us just to note that and
just to note,
fix
yeah, thank
it?
You.
Okay, thank you. So on that basis, Councillor Franco, are you happy to?
Yes, I'm happy to move the minutes. I just have a small amendment in my motion to the section on 8.7 census results. So at the end, I propose to move the minutes as adopted, but adding at the end of 8.7 census results, Councillor Franco commented on the results of the religious diversity statistics recorded in the recent 2021 Australian census, noting that 45% of the Burundara population now identifies as having no religion, up from 37% in 2016. That was the salient point I was making, and it's been inadvertently omitted.
Okay, let me just pause and make sure that we would normally put that amount of detail in. I'm not sure that we do normally in the minutes.
That's the salient point. Otherwise, it just says, I made a comment abstractly on the census with no relevance to Burundara or any topic.
So the advice is you can request that that be put in, but...
Okay, and that's my motion. So the motion will be that we adopt the minutes subject to amending 8.7 to adding noting that 45% of the Burundara population now identifies as having no religion, up from 37% in 2016, full stop.
Maybe we'd better just pause. You've got it? Yes. Now we need to see if there's a seconder. Councillor Hollingsworth, you're happy to second. Is there anyone opposed to adding that to the minutes? Okay, so as there's nobody opposed, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, Chair, the
Just
rules are
procedural?
quite clear about that.
Okay, so we'll just put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So we'll move on. So our next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officers. Councillor Hollingsworth, I think you may have a conflict.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'll be seeking a leave of absence later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Franco, your light's still on? No? Okay, so we'll note that, Councillor Hollingsworth. Thank you. Item 3, deputations and presentations, petitions, public submissions. Mr. Wee, deputations and presentations?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there is one petition in relation to mature trees on Dudley Parade in Canterbury.
Thank you, and that's up on the screen for everyone to see. So is anyone prepared to move the motion to receive and note the petition as printed? Councillor Park?
Happy to so move, Chair.
And a second to Councillor Gillies? Yep, and is anyone opposed to that? I can't see anyone opposed, so given that there's nobody opposed, I'll declare the motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Public submissions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no public submissions.
Thank you very much. So the next item of business is informal meetings of councillors. Mr. Wee, I presume there are none?
There are none to note at this meeting.
Thank you very much. So item 5 is public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a response in writing. Those submitted after 12 will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a written response to be provided in due course. Mr. Wee, any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 3 questions on notice from 2 members of the community.
Thank you very much. So we'll now go to the questions. Now, first question is from Andrea McKenna of Hawthorne East, and the subject matter is LGBTIQA+ Advisory Committee. And the question is, will Council establish an LGBTIQA+ Advisory Committee to hear from LGBTIQA+ people across our community and support Council's efforts to achieve a safe and inclusive community? So the question has been allowed because it was put in writing more than 10 days before the Council meeting. And I'm going to call upon Director Community Support Carolyn McLean to respond to the question from Ms McKenna. Thanks, Ms McLean.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Council is committed to supporting the health and wellbeing needs of all of the community, including LGBTIQA+ community members. To guide Council's support for people who identify as LGBTIQA+ as part of the refresh of a Boroondara Community Plan between October 2020 and January 2021, Council officers interviewed local health and wellbeing agencies and community organisations, including those who provide services to LGBTIQA+ members in the community, to find out about the health and wellbeing issues of most importance to the community members they support. The outcome of a consultation and analysis of the health and wellbeing data was that LGBTIQA+ communities were identified as a priority group in Council's wellbeing commitment in the Boroondara Community Plan 2021 to 31, which incorporates the Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan 2021 to 25. Council has a Public Health and Wellbeing Advisory Committee to oversee the implementation of this plan with community and organisational representatives, including members who identify as LGBTIQA+. As part of the remit of this advisory committee, Council is considering other ways we can work to support the inclusion of LGBTIQA+ communities in addition to what we are already doing. Therefore, Council is not proposing at this stage to establish an LGBTIQA+ advisory committee, given the inclusion of this work as part of the Public Health and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms McLean. And Ms McKenna will receive a written response to the question in due course. Our next question is from Mr Ian Huntley of Balwyn North, and it relates to North Balwyn Stingers Baseball Club. The question has been allowed in accordance with Governance Rules, Chapter 2, because it's been put in writing more than 10 days before the Council meeting. And the question is, please advise of the details of any proposal, financial or non-financial, related to the Victorian election to be conducted on 26 November, which may benefit the North Balwyn Stingers Baseball Club, a long-term tenant at Myrtle Park, and which, if it were to materialise, may require the assistance or endorsement of Boroondara Council. And again, I'll ask Ms McLean, Director Community Support, to respond to Mr Huntley's question. Thanks, Ms McLean.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Council is not aware of any proposal related to the Victorian election to be conducted on the 26th of November 2022, which may benefit the North Balwyn Stingers Baseball Club. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms McLean, and Mr Huntley will receive a written response. Our next question from Mr Huntley relates to aged care services in Boroondara. The question is not allowed as it relates to personnel matters. It was a question about council employees involved in aged care services and queried how long employees were employed. But because the question seeks personnel information, we did say this would be a tongue teaser. The question seeks personnel information of a personal nature. It's not going to be allowed, but the submitter of this question will receive a written response from council in due course to their question. Thank you, and that takes us to the end of our questions. So our next item is notices of motion. Mr Weed, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are no notices of motion this evening.
Thank you very much. We now move to presentation of officer reports. Does any councillor have any issue or concern with respect to the order of the agenda or wish to flag any items for discussion or items which may not need to be discussed and can thus be moved on block as accordance with the officer's recommendation? Now, there has been a suggestion that there could be the following ones moved on block, which is 7.2, routine maintenance of mechanical services, 7.4, Microsoft software agreement, 7.6, outcome of the 2022 general valuation, and 7.7, proposed MAV motions. Councillor Park?
Chair, I'm prepared to move an en bloc motion in respect of those matters, moving the officer's recommendation, subject to any objections from the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Stavrou, you had your light on.
I was
Happy to second?
Yep.
Yes. Councillor Franco, you had...
7.7, is that included in the...
Yes.
No, I don't support that motion.
To be moved on block?
Yes, because
I'm
correct.
happy to excise that one.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll move 7.2, 7.4, 7.6, Councillor Park. And Councillor Stavrou, are you happy to continue to second?
I am.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm assuming nobody's opposed based on that. Councillor Park, would you like to speak to that?
Look, I'll pass up the opportunity. I think the recommendations are set out in the public record, and the reasons therefore are well canvassed in the reports.
Thank you, Councillor Park. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those opposed? I don't think there'll be any. Thank you. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now go to item 7.1, which is recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee annual financial statements and performance statement for the year ended 30 June 2022. And that's going to be presented by Amy Montalti, Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. This report presents the recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee pertaining to the annual financial statements and performance statement for the year ended 30 June 2022. The Audit and Risk Committee meeting was held on the 8th of September, and the 21-22 annual financial statements and performance statement were reviewed by the committee and endorsed for consideration by Council. The Victorian Auditor-General's Office completed the audit of the annual financial statements and performance statement, and representatives from the Auditor-General's Office were present at the Audit Committee meeting. I might just note at this point that the Auditor-General's Office now audit Council's financial statements in-house as our external auditors. We previously had contracted auditors, HLB, Mann Judd. The auditors have found no issues that would warrant qualification of the statements and advise the committee that the Auditor-General has given preliminary approval subject to council endorsement. The recommendation authorises the Mayor, Councillor Jane Addis and Councillor Nick Stavrou to certify the annual financial statements and performance statement in their final form. Following adoption of the recommendations in the report, the annual financial statements and performance statement will be forwarded to the Auditor-General's office for final sign-off. This is expected to be received by late September or early October, in time to meet the statutory deadline of the 31st of October 2022 for submission of Council's annual report to the Minister. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ms Montalti. Any questions, councillors? I think, Councillor Stavrou, you've got a question, or?
No question. Foreshadowing a motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I don't think there are any other lights on, so let's go to your motion, Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The officer recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor, let me see who's next on the list. Councillor Thompson, I think you had your light on next.
Yeah, happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion? No, so I'll go back to you, Councillor Stavrou, to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be brief. Suffice to say that appreciative for the hard work that the officers have done to not only prepare the statements, but also to go through the obligatory and appropriate due diligence and working through with the various audits that need to be done on that. And we'll understand that that is a lot of work, and very happy for the clean financials that we've got in front of you. And I'll put that to my fellow councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Thompson, as it wasn't opposed, thank you. So we'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you, Councillor. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So the next item we're going to discuss is 7.3, Kew Library Redevelopment Steering Committee, Terms of Reference. And I believe that's going to be introduced by Tina Burke as Manager Library Services. Thank you.
Now it's on. Good evening, councillors, and through you, Madam Mayor. This report presents the terms of reference for the Kew Library Redevelopment Steering Committee and seeks councillor interest in participation on the committee. The Steering Committee will provide advice and guidance on the renewal of the Kew Library in order to provide a positive impact on social wellbeing and community connection in the immediate area of Kew and across the wider Boroondara municipality. So thank you for your consideration of the officer's recommendation and for your anticipated interest. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
No questions at this point in time. I'd just like to foreshadow a motion.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Franco, you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
The council officer report states that on section 4, the last two dot points of section 4, the key purpose of the steering committee is to translate key elements of the approved project brief into the outcomes council seeks to deliver. And the second one, I'll come to the question, but I've just got to point out where it is, and discuss items where changes are proposed to the approved project brief for endorsed design. So do we have an endorsed project brief, and when was the project brief approved and by who?
We don't have an approved project brief. We do have budget this year for a feasibility report, and once that's finalised, that will come to the committee.
Can I ask a couple more questions? What is the budget for this project, and does the steering committee intend to utilise the whole amount of the budget?
So the overall project, the funding or the budget for the project is around 17 million. but for the first stage, the feasibility report, it's about 164,000 for this financial year.
And, you know, to call it the elephant in the room, we've discussed often whether or not the building will be demolished. Is it proposed, or is there any decision on demolition or renovation, or, you know, because it's silent at the moment in this regard and the project brief doesn't exist?
There is no proposal at this stage around whether it's a redevelopment of the existing building or the demolition. We're just at the very beginning of this project and need to understand the building condition and the engineering and the like. So we really are at stage one.
So would it be fair to say that a purpose of this committee is to determine whether or not the building may be demolished or renovated?
Our CEO is going to provide an answer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just make the point that the committee doesn't have any decision-making powers? So this committee is an advisory committee, and its role is to assist officers in understanding what councillors believe to be important as part of a project like this one. But decisions which require allocation of resources or to define what the project will be are in fact decisions to be taken by this group of councillors.
Look, I'll ask a last question. Why establish the committee before developing the project brief, say the sequencing of that? Because I'll add that it seems to me the wrong way around, but no doubt you have reasons, and it'd be good to hear that.
We always do establish the actual steering committee at the commencement of the project. We are looking to understand technically different aspects of the building that would go to some of the questions you previously answered. So the role of the steering committee is to receive information and provide feedback. So we were anticipating that in the next 8 weeks we would be able to have an initial meeting of the steering committee to orient them to this project.
Thank you. Councillor Stavro.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my question may have been answered, but I was going to ask for the sequence, if I may. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is budget for the feasibility to happen this year, and the feasibility will undertake options where the steering committee is going to be of assistance to ensure that the options are viable. Am I understanding the purpose of this paper correctly?
Through the Mayor, absolutely.
And the follow-up question, thank you. As I understand it for tonight, we're only asked to endorse the terms of reference, nothing to do with any project plans further on. Am I correct in saying that?
Through the Mayor, that's correct.
Mr. Storer would like to add something.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add to what the Director for Community Support has said in terms of clarifying the role of the committee. It's important to note that part of this process is to engage in consultation with our community and library users to ensure we understand what expectations they have for a library of the future. So it's not as if this committee is going to sit in a corner and simply create something on its own. There's going to be quite a detailed process to ensure that we understand community needs, that informs what it is this committee might actually end up bringing forward to their councillor colleagues for consideration. But I want to stress again that the committee doesn't have any decision-making powers. Officers will bring their best advice. Whether it happens to align with the committee or not, that's our role. And we'd be informing this council on an objective and impartial basis.
Thank you. That answered your question, Councillor Stavro? Thank you. Councillor Gold, your light's on. You have a question? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to officers, just wondering if officers might be able to clarify for me, is there any substantial difference in the terms of reference? I was unable to identify any between the terms of reference that guided this committee in its previous existence in 2017, thereabouts, and the current terms of reference that are proposed tonight. I haven't had the opportunity to look at them side by side. I imagine they're similar.
Through you, Madam Mayor, they are. I've just updated to the new format.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question about membership, about committee membership, and particularly, in light of the CEO's comments about the importance of the community for this project, whether there's been any consideration given to potentially having 2 community members on this committee. Is that something that would be considered at this point?
The steering committees of major capital projects are forming the vehicle of being able to give feedback from a councillor perspective to then be able to provide feedback to the whole of council. So it's very different to an advisory committee. It is actually very much about the major project itself, and that's the role of the councillors on that committee. In terms of community consultation, particularly for a library redevelopment or a major sporting pavilion, we would be undertaking comprehensive consultation with library members, residents and other stakeholders.
Nothing. Just a follow-up. Then, in that circumstance, would we consider having, for instance, a separate advisory committee where the community is able to give ongoing feedback, given the value of having that, not just one-off at the beginning sort of input, but ongoing feedback? Is that something we've ever done in the past for a project like this, where we're really keen to have ongoing input from the community?
Just clarification, if I may, Councillor Biggar. What do you mean in terms of ongoing feedback? Is that in relation to library services or?
I mean into decisions that, as we've said it with this project, that how important it is that we end up with the right kind of library for what the community wants. And there are, as you know, in a major project, there are often decisions that are going throughout the course of that project where it would be helpful potentially to have a community perspective. It's not an uncommon thing to do that.
Yes, so we actually have our Library Advisory Committee that forms that purpose. That is an advisory committee of council, and it certainly is something that committee is actively involved with in terms of any of the major upgrades we do.
Sorry, thank you very much, through you, Mayor. Then just to follow up, and that committee that you just mentioned, the Library Advisory Committee, that has community members on it?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a quick one, more specifically to the 2 unnamed councillors that need to go up on that list. Are they councillors selected from a community of interest around the Kew Library, e.g. adjacent wards, or is it open more specifically across the municipality?
Yes, it's being suggested that may be a matter for us. Maybe officers would care to comment on what normally happens, but
Through Madam Mayor, normally what would take place is that the councillors who are in the adjacent wards would normally be involved. So if you look at the membership of the committee regarding the Kew Recreation Centre, for example, you have the councillors who are in that northern part of the city on that committee. So you may well take the view that the adjacent wards, the abutting wards, would be the areas from which you would draw representation, but it is entirely a matter for councillors.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? And I think we might need a discussion about how we fill the names in. We've got, we had a, yes, you had your light on. Yes.
I did, but I was, so where's Councillor Goldslight go off, and I'm not sure whether he is still intending to move a motion. Yes, sir.
Okay, so Councillor Sinfield, you've got a question?
Just a comment that might assist those that weren't here in the previous council. It was fulfilled by the councillors for Studley, Cotham and Bellevue, if I recall correctly.
Thank you. Thank you. So Councillor Gold, you foreshadowed a motion. I am aware that it is Councillor Stavrey's ward, but you foreshadowed a motion.
Yes, and my apologies in that to Councillor Stavro. I am proposing an alternative motion to the officer's recommendation, and I didn't spread it around widely beforehand because I was hoping to speak to Councillor Stavro beforehand, but we really only had a chance sort of walking into dinner to do that. So my apologies in advance for that. It's up on the screen. It's been taped up. I did that in anticipation that my fellow councillor may care to move it instead of I, but I don't think that's the case. So I'd like to move this motion.
Okay, thank you. So everyone's had time to have a look at it. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stev? No? Councillor Biggar?
Yes, I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Okay, so for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to this motion? We do have some opposition.
Yes, Chair, and I move an amendment.
Councillor Park, could we hear your amendment?
Adding after the words Kew Library and the tuck stand.
Okay.
If we're going to start doing this, pick off major projects like this, then let's do it more widely.
Okay, so do we have a I'm presuming you don't want to incorporate that into your motion, Councillor Gold?
I can't very well object, can I? Because it was discussed previously outside council, and I can understand the reason why that's being put forward, so I won't object to it.
But you would like it to be Councillor Park's motion, or you're happy to incorporate it into your
I'm
motion?
happy to incorporate it into mine.
Okay, thank you. So let's just check, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Biggar?
Yes.
Yes, you're happy to second? Yes, our CEO would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without wishing to enter into the discussion about the resolution or the motion, I should say itself, I just wanted to make the point that there is currently work underway in relation to the tuck stand to understand the structural integrity of the building. And I think we do need to at least complete that work. There's an engagement already on foot. So I just wanted to ensure that if councillors adopt this as expressed, it would either cause us to stop something which is important in midstream or warrant some form of recognition as being an exception to the intent.
Chair, would perhaps the CEO could suggest a form of words that covers off the last scenario?
Yes, what I was going to suggest was in brackets, you might, after the words tuck stand, you might just add, with the exception of works which are currently underway. And just to confirm, the only thing I'm referring to there, so you're entirely confident, is there is a consultant who's been engaged to do that structural assessment. So we do understand exactly what the weaknesses in that building are before we go anywhere near a tender process. So whatever council does, I think it would be very sensible to complete that work.
I think we're going to have some questions to clarify. So, Councillor Stavro, you...
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where does it leave then the feasibility study and work to be done for the Kew Library if we adopt this this motion?
Is that arguably in the underway group?
So what this would mean is that no further work would be undertaken in relation to Kew Library until such time as you've had the discussions in relation to our budget. It's possible that those budget discussions could be concluded in terms of the council's understanding of where the budget may well be set in this half prior to December. So it's quite possible that there will have been a discussion with councillors about the budget in October, that you may adopt a view about how the budget needs to be framed for the upcoming financial year, and on that basis we could then have a further discussion with you about what that means regarding Kew Library.
Thank you. Councillor Stavro, you had a follow-up?
So am I to understand correctly then this motion effectively stops the Kew Library at its tracks? Is that right?
At this point in time, yes.
Well, may I then, with a follow-up question, I think, could I propose to go back to the original motion put by Councillor Park?
This is the, well, what
No,
sorry, I should leave.
No, go on. I think this is the motion on the table at the moment. So maybe we carry this one through. So Councillor Galt, I think you had your light on with the question. I think we need to clarify questions. Councillor Biggar.
I did have a question. It might have been answered. I just wondered whether we needed more clarity around the timing in terms of the final part of the phrase, or whether we're comfortable with the uncertainty, as the CEO has just mentioned, that it could be that we resolve this by Christmas, it could be we don't, and whether or not we need more clarity around that. And that's a question, I suppose, to all of us for consideration.
Mr. Story.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One might need a crystal ball to answer that question because the answer lies in your hands. Our intention, at least, is that we will get some clarity with you in relation to the upcoming budget in October. My reading of this is that when you have that clarity, you will then be in a position for us to come back and discuss with you the future of these projects.
Thank you. Councillor Franco.
That was my question, same one.
Thank you. Who else? We've got Councillor Thompson's light on.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Have we got a seconder on this motion?
I think...
Should we be
Councillor Biggar,
suspending standing orders whilst we
I think
do
we
this?
almost are at that point, aren't we?
Would
Would you like to move?
I don't know if there's not too many more lights on. No. Is it more beneficial to the mover and the seconder? Is it more about what's in this financial year's budget or in future years' budgets? Is almost a question to the mover. And should it say after this financial budget discussions in October?
You were about to respond, Mr. Storer, or you're happy for me to go back to the mover?
Well, perhaps I can just clarify. The discussions we will have with you in October will actually be about future years as well. So the long-term financial strategy, which you look at every time you adopt a budget, will have to be considered as part of those very same budget discussions. So you won't be just looking at 1 year in isolation, you'll be looking at the next 10.
And that's, I guess, to my point, is it more about future years' budgets rather than this current budget? I just raise that for a... It's a question for the mover, so no need to...
Okay. I'll go back to the mover and then just to clarify that, are you happy to leave it as it is?
I would have covered all that in speaking to the motion in any event, and that's specifically why I inserted the words financial year in there to allow us a little bit more time. My intention was not to look beyond that.
Okay, so is everyone happy to continue with questions, or would you prefer to suspend standing orders briefly? Happy to continue with questions?
No, I would prefer to suspend standing orders to ask some more free-flowing questions.
Okay, so is anyone happy to second that request? Councillor Thompson? Is anyone opposed to that? Councillor Park, you're opposed? So let's just put it to a vote. I'm presuming we don't need to speak to it. Those in favour of suspending standing orders? I think that carries. Yes, thank you. So that's carried. Those against? Yes, okay, thank you. So we'll suspend standing orders. Thank you, everyone. So more questions. Councillor Stavro.
Look, it really goes to trying to understand the sequence of events here, because I don't think it's clear to me, I don't think it's clear to everyone, and I'm sure don't think it's clear to the Studley ward where this library is placed, and nor to our broader community. What we need to understand, at least, I think, and highlight is what budget item is the first budget item that's been discussed that would be associated with the Kew Library, and that would be when, so that we understand the timings, because I wouldn't like a motion to be put forward that actually kills a budget that was already in place for this financial year.
Thank you. This is an answer.
So this year's financial budget for the Kew Library feasibility is in the order of 164,000.
Did that answer your question?
Which means it's in this year's budget, and this is something that would move ahead normally, and if we stop it, we're changing what we've already agreed. Is that right?
That's correct, and implications depending upon when this would be finalised. It may jeopardise the timing of the project as it's currently in the four-year budget.
Can I then ask another question of process, I guess? Has that ever happened before, that a budget has been approved for an item that's been stopped?
I think we just want to be clear about the language that you've just used. I don't think the project can be described as being stopped at this point. What is being proposed is that there be no further action taken until you have a budget discussion. So that, to me, does not suggest that the project itself would not or would never proceed. Have there been examples where we've basically pulled back on a budget to have further investigation or further work done, or to have a review? Over the years, I've seen that happen a couple of times. It's not common, but I have seen it happen.
Thank you for that, Mr. Storer. I think I was careful enough to say that the project, not that the project has been stopped, but a budget item that has been approved. I guess my major point would be then, would this feasibility study help at all in the future discussion of the budget?
Ultimately, yes, and to be able to understand any latent conditions of the current building.
Thank you. So we have Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. Just a question through you to officers in relation to the expenditure of any or all of the 164,000 or thereabouts that's set aside for the preliminary works at this point in time. Is it likely or is it envisaged that much or any of that 164,000 would be spent prior to the discussion on the budget?
If the budget discussions are held in October, I don't believe there'd be any expenditure incurred.
Thank you. So as a follow-up, if I may, is re-establishing the steering committee any impediment to further budgetary discussions and approving the terms of reference at this point in time, in the opinion of officers?
For the stage that officers currently are, I don't believe establishing the steering committee would have any impact on any budgets at this point. So no dollars would be expended.
Thank you. So on that then, should this motion fail, I might foreshadow that in fact I might move the officer's recommendation, or perhaps the ward councillor might like to do that if this motion should fail. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Chair, I'd move that we resume standing orders.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hollingsworth. So is those in favour of resuming standing orders? That's carried, I think, close to unanimously. Those against? Nobody's against, thank you. So that's carried. So we'll resume standing orders. So we're back to Councillor Galt's motion, which was seconded by Councillor Biggar. Yep. So is anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. So we'll go to the mover, Councillor Galt.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I've got absolutely no objection to work being done on the Kew Library. I've been there numerous times and it is definitely a very dated facility. We've done upgrading work to lots of other libraries and in its turn it must be done up. But when I look down through the library itself, it is a fully functioning facility. Certain things may be able to be done better, but in reading the papers for tonight, some of the key drivers are integration with Alexandra Gardens, creating open space, providing flexible spaces, spaces to encourage connections, all very laudable, but they don't stand in the way of its operation as a library and an educational facility and an information facility. So in other words, it is fully functioning. The only reason for me to put up this motion is that we have just become very aware that we need to tighten our belts. And it was in fact in discussions outside this chamber that we talked about things like the tuck stand that may have to be tightened up and other projects that may have to be tightened up. So I was somewhat surprised that this came forward. One would have to ask, why start a new project if we believe we need to tighten up on existing projects or potentially cancel some existing projects that are already underway? I do not say it should be stopped at all. I'm just questioning the timing of this and simply asking that let's go through the budget discussions for this year, which Mr. Storer has already discussed or commented on, and will help us clarify what we do have money for and what we don't. And I would like to see, we're already proposing some other things not be taken further until those decisions are made. And I believe Kew Library fits into exactly the same category. So I recommend to my colleagues tonight that we simply hold it until we've had a chance to have those discussions and decide and understand what we have in the way of budgetary funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. Councillor Biggar, you were the seconder. Would you like to speak now?
I'd like to reserve my right and my voice, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm opposed to this motion. This is what policy on the fly looks like, and I absolutely oppose this sort of motion coming to us in the chamber. So we've set a budget, we've had budget discussions, and there are many items of concern that we will be talking about in October. But I think to throw council processes into disarray, where we have a program of works, which from the question asked by Councillor Stavrou is very small and modest and will actually help inform this future discussion. I believe that this motion is very disruptive. I think it will not only not achieve what its general intention is, I think it'll actually disrupt our ability to understand what is needed at the Kew Library. I've also been to the Kew Library and believe that it's in need of some work, as we all agreed at the last council budget discussion. So this, I believe, is very preemptive of a future discussion that we will have. I think that it has consequences far beyond what appears simply on the screen. The unintended consequences of this is one of the reasons why I oppose this type of motion coming unannounced to the chamber. Our council officers, I wish to thank them for their frank advice on this matter, but I encourage my fellow councillors to oppose this motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Park.
Thank you, Chair. Those who were in the previous council would well know that this is a project that has been on the books for many, many years and which has already been significantly deferred. It was part of a rolling program. It wasn't one in isolation. You can't reasonably redevelop every other library in the city and then pull the plug on this one. It's simply not fair, and it's simply not reasonable, and it will never, 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 never meet community expectations. I'm very happy with the movers' concern to make sure that we're financially responsible, and I mean that in all sincerity. We do need to take into account the significant cost uplift across the board, and we will need to look at how we go about keeping a balanced budget. However, Kew Library isn't the place to start. And it seems to me that the history of this project ought to be well and truly understood by each and every councillor around the table. I don't think that a motion like this coming off the floor has given that adequate opportunity. There was discussion previously about who ought to be on the committee, and that's always been a matter for council. You know, there's nothing new about the approach that was taken with the officer's recommendation. It's always a decision for those around the table. Logically, the approach that was taken previously seems to make good sense to me. In respect of this motion, though, the answer by Ms McLean to Councillor Sinfield's question is the important factor here. There is no expense and no downside to adopting the officer's recommendation, and that's what I'd urge councillors to do, to defeat this motion, and it's already been foreshadowed then that the officer's recommendation will be moved. That's the appropriate course here. We're not committing to new expenditure, and it's something that can be considered in the October discussions, as it would have been in any event. Everything will be considered, but we don't need to say to the community, to the users of that library, forget it, we're pushing this back ad infinitum yet again. This is a project that should have been finished, as I recall. Finished. So I'd strongly urge you that this isn't the appropriate motion tonight. Let's stay the course, form the committee. If ultimately the will of council is that the project is to be deferred, then the committee won't have a lot of work to do, but that's okay.
Thanks, Councillor Park. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to echo the words of the previous councillors, Councillor Watson and Councillor Park, putting the history of this project as well in front of us. I think one of the major reasons, in addition to the arguments that have been made, is that some of the issues that Councillor Gold made, even though I do appreciate, in all honesty as well, the need for budget due diligence and responsibility, but some of the issues regarding the library being a fully functioning library, etc., in fact puts forward the need for such a committee to actually educate that the libraries of the future are something else than just lending books. We've seen that not only in the libraries that we've already refurbished around the municipality, and this is the last one to be refurbished, but we've seen it internationally, what's happening with libraries. We've seen it through COVID-19, how libraries have played an important role as a hub for the community, an area where state and federal government have asked us to use libraries to actually contribute to the communities as an area of central, bringing bringing people together, particularly people that have got needs in terms of loneliness, in terms of getting services and other things. So libraries are crucially important. To say to them now that we're not going to actually going to put this project back is not the right thing to do, particularly since the motion that's up on the screen right now has nothing to do with the original modest motion, which stated a set of standard terms of reference and an ability to put together a committee to look through the feasibility of this library. Just that, a budget that's already been approved and will in no way put a dent in future planning. And to talk about discussing the budget furthermore at a later part of the year, there will be so many things that we need to discuss and other aspects that are not really tied to the Kew Library, and it shouldn't be put together like that. And I'm totally opposed to that because of that reason as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stavro. Now, the queuing's not working correctly, so I'm not quite sure whether it was Councillor Hollingsworth or Councillor Sinfield first. So maybe Councillor Hollingsworth?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to sincerely also thank Councillor Galt for raising the matter of obviously financial and fiscal responsibility. But through having the debate and listening to the response of councillors and officers, hearing Ms McLean state that there will be no commencement of work of the committee prior to our October workshop budget review, I sense that this discussion will continue in October anyway, but I see the terms of reference as something that is enabling a committee to form and nothing more at this stage until after we have our budget reviews. So it was good to have the debate, but I feel that October will resolve the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. No financial expenditure is likely before the budget discussions in October, as confirmed by Ms McLean, and I think that's an important point to note. Enabling officers and councillors to refamiliarise themselves with this project, I think, is vitally important before those discussions take place in October. It's been some years since we've come together around the table and discussed that. The project had started. I can't say it was well advanced, but it had certainly started and we'd engaged with the community. And while a lot has transpired in the last couple of years since then, a lot of good work had already been done, which forms a good foundation for those discussions. I've engaged with the Ward Councillor prior to tonight's meeting, and I believe that we're on the same page with regard to this. I would like to express my interest in participating in the committee should we move down that pathway, as I did previously in 2017, to continue to deliver for our community. This is a really important step to inform those budget discussions in October. It doesn't cost us anything, but it will allow us to have a wholesome discussion come budget discussion time in October, rather than us sitting there devoid of information and familiarity with the project, with more questions than answers around the table. So I would urge Councillor Galt to in fact withdraw his motion and allow the Ward Councillor to take the lead on this project and this debate tonight. And as I foreshadowed earlier, should this fail, I or perhaps the Ward Councillor might like to move the officer's recommendation, but I would certainly be prepared to do so should this fail. And I encourage my colleagues to take the same position on it so that we have the fullness of information as best we can come those discussions later in the year at no further expenditure to the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Biggar, I don't see any other lights, so would you like to speak?
Yes, briefly, thank you. It seems to me that in this discussion that councillors seem to have forgotten that this motion actually puts a pause on two different projects, both the Kew Library and the Tuck Stand. So in saying this is calling out one project, that's actually incorrect because it has been amended to include two. So I actually am surprised that councillors are not embracing this as a measured and a careful approach to budget considerations and fiscal responsibility, which by my view, I think is exactly what the community would expect of us. I believe that the community expectations, and particularly those who've done any kind of building works themselves in the last few years, would be that they would understand that prices have gone sky high in the construction industry, and that we need to take careful stock. We need to not go into our budget discussions with the same set of expectations or agreements or even a mode of thinking that we did last year, because it's a different year, and it's particularly a different year when it comes to the construction industry. So it seems to me that given what we've said and what we've heard from officers about the fact that actually with the amendment saying that the exception of works which are currently underway, that means that the work that will be done by October, given that this is now actually the 26th of September, will still occur. I don't see that that there's a problem with the motion that we have in front of us. And in fact, what it does is it basically says, hold on, the establishment of a steering committee, before we have agreed scope or budget or plans, it puts the cart before the horse. And in this current environment, I think we need to be open on both of these projects about what is appropriate and take that kind of careful thoughtfulness and open-mindedness to our budget discussions in October. So I would encourage my fellow councillors to support the motion before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. So we'll now return to the mover to close the debate. Councillor Gold.
We've had many excellent words tonight on both sides. There is no doubt the Kew Library project is a worthy project, and in time we will see it go forward. But I'd have to say there are also many other projects, some that have been waiting for even longer, sporting pavilions in various wards. And as it's been raised tonight and added to this motion, the tuck stand was included in the 2009 master plan for that area. At this point in time, it's now had barbed wire fences erected around it, while sporting clubs operate out of portable sheds that are brought in and brought out during sporting seasons. And yet that effectively is on hold at this point in time until we go through these discussions. All I'm seeking is balance, that all these projects get considered together when we sit down to talk about them. And to say that nothing will occur over that time or making this decision tonight will have no effect, I disagree with that. By setting up a steering committee in a public forum, which will be televised and minuted, says that clearly we're moving forward with the Kew Library. And it is, I think, incorrect and misleading to raise public expectations for something that we need to have a budget discussion on, like many other projects. All I'm asking us to do tonight is to hold it till we have that discussion. And as it has been pointed out tonight, that discussion is not that far away where we can resolve this and move forward with those projects we believe are worthy, and to stall those that we absolutely must stall because of the very real situation we're experiencing in the market at the moment. Not of our making, but of the public market. So in that balanced approach, I ask my fellow councillors to vote for this motion tonight, and let's discuss it further down the track as part of our budget discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. So I'll now put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? So that motion fails. So it was foreshadowed that maybe Councillor Stavrou would like to move a motion.
I would, Madam Mayor, the officer's recommendation.
Now, Councillor Sinfield, you foreshadowed that you would like to have your name included.
Thank you. I would. Perhaps Councillor Stavrou might speak to that.
And well, I'm comfortable since you put your name forward, and Jim expressed an interest as well, and given the history of it, if they accept, I'm happy for that.
Okay, so can we fill those words in and then check that we have a seconder? There you know that? No.
So there's nothing there.
Thank you. So that's your motion, Councillor Stavrou.
It is, Madam Mayor.
And Councillor Sinfield, you've got your light on to second.
I'd be delighted to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to that motion? Councillor Gold. Okay, thank you. So we'll return to the mover, Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't wish to go over old ground. Look, I wasn't prepared tonight for an opposition to this this particular paper, and Councillor Gold said he tried to contact me. Unfortunately, I didn't have my phone, so I apologise for that. But that conversation perhaps may have been informing. But look, the way that I see this tonight is it is a simple process to set up the steering committee, pure and simple. The terms of the steering committee are put in front of us and to ensure that the first steps are there and the feasibility has a steering committee to steer it. I don't agree that it's putting the cart before the horse, because the last time I checked the definition of the word steering, kind of the steering goes in front of the vehicle, of whatever type it is. So to my thinking, it does happen at the beginning of a project. I think it is appropriate. I think the community issue that Councillor Gold raised, that they might have expectations raised that the project's going to go ahead. I think the community is already expecting that. But that doesn't mean that through our diligent discussions in budget time, everything that we are putting forward will indeed go ahead at a particular point in time. It is another question for later in the year, in October. I think I would leave it at that, because this is just a simple terms of reference and establishment of a steering committee only.
Thanks, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Sinfield, you were the seconder. Would you like to speak now?
Thanks, I will briefly. This motion doesn't prevent further discussion on this project come budget time. I think it will inform those discussions, which is really important, so that we can have a full discussion on what the scope and budget and breadth might be come that time. So I think I'll leave my comments there. It seems like a logical first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not opposed to this, but I just want to propose something to the mover to see whether they would consider adding Councillor Galt as the ward councillor for Glenferrie, so that there's 4 councillors on that, given Glenferrie's all of 100 metres from where this site's located, and Trinity Grammar, that's going through a substantial master plan. That committee could actually benefit from a ward councillor's advice.
Okay. I just checked with the officers. There's nothing to preclude. Thank you. Thank you. So, Councillor Stavrou, would you be happy to add that to your motion?
Sorry, I don't see that as an issue. If Councillor Gold wishes to participate and give us his wisdom, happy to receive it.
And Councillor Sinfield, you were the seconder.
Frankly, there's a library in Hawthorn, but sure, the more the merrier. Mayor?
Okay, let's just get that added in and make sure that we know what we're voting on. Okay. Let's go back to Councillor Stavrou to close the debate.
Sorry,
Oh,
Chair.
sorry. Yeah, I didn't see you light. Sorry, Councillor Park.
Chair, we're talking about the horse tonight, so it's not a situation of the cart before the horse, and this is the way that council has managed major projects for at least the last decade that we've been here. and I'm sure for many, many years before that. So one only needs to take the time to actually look at what we've done in the past, and that's worked extremely well, and certainly worked very well with all of the previous library redevelopments. This is entirely the appropriate approach, and I welcome the addition of the Glenferrie Ward Councillor as one of the steering committee members, and look forward to his enthusiastic support of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Now we'll go to Councillor Stavrou to close the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm glad we've all have arrived at the same destination, albeit by interesting means. And given the horse metaphor, I hope that it doesn't become the proverbial camel designed by committee. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Okay, those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We got there in the end. So we'll now go to 7.5, which is administrative review of governance rules, and that's going to be introduced by Brian Wee, Manager Governance and Legal. Thanks, Mr. Wee.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this report recommends two changes to the governance rules to keep up with the local government changes to the Local Government Act, and also advises councillors about community engagement and feedback received about these proposed changes to the rules. The two changes are firstly to include provision for online meetings in the governance rules. This is required by a change to the Local Government Act. The second is to change the way the mayor is elected, also another change included in the Local Government Act. The community engagement process occurred over 2 weeks in late August and early September, and the majority of survey respondents supported both changes. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. Are there any questions for officers? Can't see any lights on. Is someone happy to move a motion? This is like an auction, waiting for the first. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield?
Happy to second it.
Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to this? Thank you. So, Councillor Thompson, would you like to speak to this?
Only to say, Madam Mayor, that the officer's report and recommendations align ourselves with the Act and that they speak for themselves. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I'm assuming, Councillor Sinfield, you're happy for it to be put? Thank you. So we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Wee. Now, we're going to item 7.7, proposed City of Boroondara motions for the Municipal Association of Victoria, MAV, State Council on 14 October 2022. And I believe that's going to be introduced by Mr. Wee, or not? Yes.
Happy to do a brief introduction in respect of the procedural aspect, which simply is that this motion is proposed to be put on the 14th of October at the MAV State Council meeting. The Municipal Association of Victoria advocates on behalf of councils on issues that affect councils across Victoria. And I'll turn to Mr. Taylor in terms of the motion itself. But just one very quick correction. In the form of the motion, on the second last paragraph of the last page of the motion, there is a apostrophe missing. There is a significant variation among councils' S apostrophe involvement in kindergarten, and that will be added before the motion is passed to the MAV.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wee. Mr. Taylor, you're going to present a bit more?
Thank you, and and through you, Madam Chair. So this motion is for the Victorian Government to fully fund all infrastructure requirements at local government-owned kindergarten venues to support changes to 3- and 4-year-old kindergarten as part of its recently announced reform. So this reform will see an increase to 3-year-old kinder and a doubling of 4-year-old kinder. And while the impacts of 3-year-old kinder increase are better understood, the changes to 4-year-old kinder were announced without consultation, and council has yet to fully understand the implications to services and buildings, although they will be significant, especially for single-room kinders. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Councillors, are there any questions? No? Councillor Thompson?
Through you to the officers, is this through Department of Education or Treasury and Finance?
Department of Education.
I will declare my conflict and I'll leave the chamber, Madam Mayor, if I can.
Thanks very much,
I have a
Councillor
direct
Thompson.
conflict on this one.
And we'll note that. Thank you. We'll just pause for a moment. We'll get you back in when we've finished, thanks. So, Councillor Hollingsworth, I think. The queuing, as I said, is a bit dodgy.
Thank you. I was going to foreshadow a motion and still happy to do so. I've just noticed Councillor Franco's put his light on for a question. Thank you.
Yep. Councillor Franco.
Thanks. Just some questions. There's no evidence backing up this statement and rationale. Is that for any reason? Details of the funding implications, etc., the shortfalls?
So basically, at this point, we're aware of what the ramifications are for 15 hours of subsidised 3-year-old kinder, and that's been put to council before. What happened approximately a couple of months after that was that the current Victorian government announced a doubling of paid 4-year-old kinder. So what that means basically is that many of the standalone kindergartens that are community-based kindergartens will not have sufficient room because effectively, if you think about the 15 hours of funded kinder for 4-year-olds now, it's actually going to be double that. And a lot of the kindergartens in many councils are on small blocks, so unable to even double. But this motion's very much around ensuring that the Victorian government promise to the community is fully funded in terms of its delivery for infrastructure. I hope that is helpful.
Yep. It's the case, isn't it, that the Victorian government is contributing something like $5 billion to the reforms?
It's not clear-cut exactly who will be given what at this point because it is all application-based. So we're unaware of whether Boroondara would get any of that slice of action. And interestingly enough, with the latest reform that was announced for 4-year-old kinder, it appears that the state government is intending to actually build new kindergartens in areas mostly on the fringe of the urban area for Melbourne. So while there's been a funding announcement, it's completely unclear what Boroondara will get.
It is the case, isn't it, that there are block grants that have been announced, and that was part of the reason we entered into the Kindergarten Infrastructure Services Plan to be able to access those grants, yet there's no mention of the state block grants in the rationale or motion anywhere here.
Okay, so what council...
Chair, can I just make the point that that wasn't a question, that was a statement.
Why isn't there any mention? Okay, I agree with Councillor Park. Why is there no mention of the grants?
So, just to let you know, Councillor Franco, that what council has signed off on is the kindergarten infrastructure program data outcomes. it is not signed off on going into any financial arrangement with the Victorian Government. So it's not correct what you have said in terms of council signing off on block grants. We haven't been offered any grants at this point.
No, on the kindergarten infrastructure services structural plan.
Yes.
Correct, I may have the acronym completely
And
wrong.
that's nothing to do with block grants. That's the second stage of any outcome that would happen for councils. What this council has signed off on is an understanding with the Victorian Government that they will 100% fund any infrastructure that is related to the early years reform.
Got another question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Was it not the case, though, that the infrastructure plan, a reason, not the reason for signing off on it, was that it would facilitate councils wishing to seek infrastructure grants for kindergarten infrastructure to be able to have some access, and that would have been taken into account. Isn't that the case?
No, that's not correct at all, unfortunately. It is actually about the importance of identifying the kindergartens that probably will not be able to meet the demand for 15 hours of 3-year-old kinder. So it was based only on the 3-year-old kinder. There was no mention at that stage of an increase, doubling of hours for 4-year-old kinder. So the whole point of the KISP, which is the abbreviation, is actually to identify those kinders that would require infrastructure additions in the future, but that does not involve a commitment of any funding from the Victorian Government. It's merely an identification process.
Okay. The opening sentence of the rationale, could you explain why officers state that the Victorian Government does not fully understand the implications? Yeah. And while we're at it, another colourful phrase, the Victorian Government does not understand the nuance of
Getting
kindergarten
a little
and
bit
local.
close
I mean,
to not
these are very
being a
colourful statements, and I think it'd be good to get some substance behind the.
Councillor Park, you're...
Chair, point of order. It's not for a councillor to characterise in questions content of a report by council officers as, quote, colourful, unquote. It's disrespectful and it's inappropriate. This opportunity is to ask questions. Those questions ought to be put in a respectful manner, firstly, and secondly, in a way that is clearly capable of being answered.
Would you like to rephrase your question?
Yes, Madam Chair. Why state that the Victorian Government does not fully understand the implications, and why state that, sorry, I've got to find my position again on the paper, that the Victorian Government does not understand the nuance of kindergartens.
So if I can take your answer in relation to the announcement of the doubling of the 4-year-old kindergarten program. So that was done without consultation with community kindergartens and for-profit providers as well. What it does mean if you double a kindergarten's hours is that you have to have the potential to be able to have double the classes. So it's a simple matter of logistics. And that would be something that you would anticipate a government would actually talk to the early years providers about and have consultation. And if there had been consultation, the industry would have been able to provide that information that literally in some suburbs, kindergartens can't be doubled because of the size of the land that they're on. And the state government, if they sit down and do the numbers on doubling kindergarten sizes, it's going to be an awful lot more than the amount of money. So the lack of consultation was deeply disappointing, not just to councils, but the early years industry, and our own community kindergartens in Burundara are very concerned about how this will be able to be managed with the community, because if the government is funding 30 hours of 4-year-old kinder, not 15 hours of kinder, then naturally the community and parents will expect that their children have that 30 hours of kindergarten, yet where are they going to have it? And these are just really basic questions that the state government did not consult the industry on. So it's pretty clear that there wasn't a full understanding of the implications.
Thanks, Ms McLean. Thank you. Councillor Stavrou, you had your light on?
I did, but I think Ms McLean's answer went quite a lot in answering my question, but I'll frame it because language, colourful or otherwise, I lost the debate a little bit there. So the question that raises to mind is, if we were to adhere with the government policy, would there be any adverse budgetary implications for us to a high degree of probability?
Okay, so the initial kindergarten infrastructure plan that Council participated in was just for the 15 hours of paid 3-year-old. And that identified there are 5 or 6 kindergartens that would need to be expanded in Burundara to be able to accommodate that. So that was agreed. Of course, it's nothing to do with the funding, but the statistics were agreed. What's happened now is, with the doubling of 4-year-old kinder, none of that analysis has happened. And given the numbers of children that are in 15 hours of 4-year-old kinders now doubling, it literally appears to be an impossible task to be able to accommodate what those children should rightly have.
Thank you for that. And a sort of second question, are there other, I know you mentioned councils that might be getting some support, but are there other councils that, in your experience that you've spoken to, are experiencing similar problems with this particular proposal?
Well, certainly the network of the Eastern Region councils are very, very concerned about what this means. We've also had feedback from councils in the West. I would say, and the feedback that we're getting from the Municipal Association of Victoria is similar levels of concern, and they were not consulted about the doubling of 4-year-old kinder either, and you would expect that that would have happened to enable them to have been able to consult with local government in Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, did you have a question or just your motion?
Yes.
Thank you. So I don't think there are any other questions, so would you like to tell us your motion?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I've just noticed Councillor Watson.
Sorry.
Just got in time.
Look, this question might be appropriate to take offline, but I was just wondering whether council officers had done any discussions with some of the kindergartens in the community regarding whether they can in fact deliver a program for, I think it's in particular for 3-year-olds, within the fees that the government has specified. Because I guess what I'm getting to is, if they can't deliver a program with the no-gap policy that the government has specified, then why would we apply for a grant to upgrade things because they can't deliver the program? Is this an appropriate question for this forum, or should I take that offline and ask you later?
It's probably not germane to this actual MAV motion, but there is that connection, and there is, I can say that the community kindergartens in Burundara are extremely concerned about the no-fee gap, because it does mean there's an expectation in the community. However, that was an announcement which, again, was not consulted on. So, the community and the industry is scrambling to see what this will mean.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Hollingsworth, your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to support the officer's recommendation.
Okay, let's just see if there's a seconder. I think Councillor Gillies, we've got quite a queue, but I think Councillor Gillies was first. Thank you. So for the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed? No? Thank you. So we'll go to Councillor Hollingsworth. You were Councillor Franco? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Ms McLean, for answering all the questions with such great detail. And a lot of what I was going to say you've actually already covered, so I won't duplicate it. What I will say is I look forward as the Burundara MAV delegate to go to the State Council meeting on the 14th of October, and I'll be accompanied by our Governance Officer, Mr Wee, and put this motion on behalf of Burundara because I've heard over many, many years of concerns with infrastructure problems where particularly inner city metro councils are limited for space, but we're not deemed growth corridors. So other areas, newer subdivisions, newer developments, there seems to be a lot of funding going towards the infrastructure of, for example, schools and kindergartens in those areas. But Burundara being an older established area with virtually no spare land to build on is not deemed in need of additional infrastructure, and yet we have an incredibly high population compared to a lot of our rural municipalities. And we, as we know, are having building of large social and affordable housing projects across Burundara. 2 of them have already commenced. And we're bringing more and more people into the precinct. We're now going to double the capacity of children being eligible for enrolment into kindergarten at 3 and 4-year-old levels, but we do not have any additional infrastructure. It's been talked and debated tonight that we have to be very fiscally responsible. Budget is tight. Everyone knows that. COVID has taken its toll on all councils, and we're no exception. And we do not have a spare 10, 20 or 30 million to build an additional kindergarten. We don't have the space, and anything that we did look at doing in the future would be likely to need underground car park. That doubles the cost of infrastructure renewal. And then we now have to accommodate the children where we want to give them a high level of care in service and facilities that are fit for purpose. And without any additional funding or commitment from the state to do this, it's making it very, very difficult. So I urge all councillors to support the motion that we're wanting to put forward to MAV, and I will look forward to going to the meeting on the 14th of October and providing strong advocacy on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Gillies, would you like to reserve your right? Thank you. Councillor Franco.
Thanks. The kindergarten funding announcements are some of the most significant early childhood education reforms of recent times, and they've been very well received. It wouldn't appear that from the discussion in this chamber, but there has been a lot of positive feedback in relation to those reforms. My concern with the motion is that it reads in a very colourful way, slamming the Victorian government as having no idea what it's doing and the nature of those reforms. It seems to do that in a bubble. I don't have a problem with seeking additional funding, but the sort of blanket slamming of the reforms is what probably what does concern me, and the fact that those colourful, I called them, remarks and are not backed by evidence in the report before us. And I appreciate that the Director, Carolyn McLean, did verbally articulate some of those issues, and I appreciate that. But the fact that it's not here and it's not backed up in that way, and it carries a different degree of weight when it's presented in a written form and it can be seen by others. Lacking that and sort of having more of the colourful motion that reads like more of a political advertising.
Point of
well
order,
written.
Chair. Sorry, point of order. I think that's objectionable and designed to embarrass council officers and inappropriate in this forum. Section 83.1.1.3.
Thank you. So would you mind toning it down a bit, please?
So, fair enough. It's well written, I'll say that. But that's my concern now. To present it without that and without that context, I do think local government does need to come to the party sometimes. There's no reference to the block funding grants and the other grants here in this motion. So taken in isolation and taken out of context, I think we miss some of the nuances, and it comes across as a very negative critique of the early childhood education reforms. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
I don't mind local government coming to the party, but it shouldn't be paying for the party. I can't believe that any councillor would find this motion objectionable. It beggars belief, particularly in a situation where we've just had a lengthy debate about major projects that actually touch on council responsibility. Mind you, further instances of incredible historic cost shifting. You look at the situation we find ourselves in today, where we're funding such a huge amount of costs for libraries. The other thing that's missed here by the previous speaker in trying to categorise this as some sort of political statement by officers, which clearly it's not, is the very first three words of the rationale. Perhaps Councillor Franco didn't notice those. So for his benefit, I'll read them out. Successive Victorian governments. Now, the ordinary and clear, unambiguous meaning of that is more than one, not just the Andrews government. What was before the Andrews government? Oh, gee, it was the coalition. So criticism, special criticism, hasn't been reserved for the Labor government, if that's your sensitivity. No. We're talking about successive Victorian governments. And the criticism relates to both sides of the political divide. So let's not try and make this something that it clearly never was. We don't need the histrionics. We actually need to just look at the facts. The facts are that this shouldn't be at the cost of the ratepayer. It should not be at the cost of the ratepayer. It is that simple. We shouldn't be debating this. This should have not only unanimous support, but enthusiastic support. And I challenge you to go and explain to your long-suffering ratepayers why they ought to be paying for this. As they cop it in the neck at every turn. That's why we pay taxes, not why we pay rates.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair. Is that rounding off the debate?
I can't see any other lights on, so...
Thank you. I think some very clear points have been made very eloquently. I would just add that it's incumbent, it's important for councils to take advocacy roles seriously, and I have no problem with the strength of the wording in the rationale. I think it is totally in keeping with an active advocacy, and I commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Hollingsworth, we'll return to you for...
Thank you. I will be very brief. As Councillor Park touched on, the level of support for this motion is about our residents, our constituents, and it's their welfare. It's the welfare of the children going to the facilities. It's the welfare of the parents and carers taking the children to the facilities and providing a level of appropriate infrastructure that accommodates their needs. Not only will it put an extra strain on the buildings, but obviously car park access and traffic implications by doubling the numbers of going to and from. Now, it's wonderful that the children will have this opportunity. It's wonderful for the parents that they will be able to take up this opportunity. But at some stage, our buildings are going to need renewal, and this motion addresses the need for that and recognises that at some stage, funding will be appropriate so that we can continue to offer the service to all families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. So we'll now put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So that motion's carried. Thank you, councillors. And we'll get Councillor Thompson back. Thanks, officers. So our next item is general business. Councillor Hollingsworth, you've foreshadowed a conflict of interest.
Thank you,
in
Madam.
relation to.
Yes, I wanted to request a leave of absence from the 17th of October to the 23rd of October.
Thank you very much.
I will take my leave. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll just get that up on the screen. So 17th to the 23rd? Yep. Do we need it up? Oh, 17th to the 23rd, you said? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I think we only had one day in initially, so I think it's just being amended. Okay. Okay, is everyone happy to not have it up on the screen? So the application is leave of absence for the dates between the 17th and the 23rd of October. Yep, so Councillor Watson, you're...
Yeah, happy to move that motion.
And seconded Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to.
Is anyone opposing that motion? Thank you. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you. So we'll get Councillor Hollingsworth back. Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield, you foreshadowed that you have a matter for general business.
Thank you, I do. I'd like to speak briefly to Police Remembrance Day, which occurs this Thursday, if I may.
Thank you. Please do.
Thank you, colleagues. This Thursday, the 29th of September, is Police Remembrance Day, also known as Blue Ribbon Day. It's a chance for the community to say thank you to those who protect and serve our community and ensure that those who have fallen are never forgotten. It's a day that has a very special place in many hearts, particularly here in Boroondara, remembering the Eastern Freeway tragedy that claimed the lives of 4 officers. 174 police officers have died in the line of duty, leaving behind family, friends, colleagues and loved ones. Remembrance services will be held in Melbourne and various locations across Victoria, and the details are available on my social media or remember.org.au. The main event is on Thursday at 10 a.m. There is a march and parade that will start from Princess Bridge in St Kilda Road, that will travel along St Kilda Road to the Victoria Police Memorial in Kings Domain. A service will follow at the Victoria Police Memorial. I encourage my colleagues and our community to honour their memory by attending one of these commemoration services being held across Victoria. I hope that wherever you are, you will pause and remember the women and men who have lost their lives while serving and protecting our community. My thoughts, and I hope I can say our thoughts, will be with our local police as our protectors and the families, friends and colleagues who are missing their loved one. I encourage you to visit the Blue Ribbon website, which is remember.org.au, or call into a police station and you can purchase items such as lapel pins that raise funds to support the building of new and improved emergency facilities in Victorian hospitals that are then named in memory of the fallen officers. You can also donate to Victoria Police Legacy, a charitable non-for-profit organisation that provides a range of services to police families throughout Victoria who have suffered the loss of a loved one, particularly their children. In acknowledging National Police Remembrance Day, I would like to finish by thanking our local police here at Burundara and Camberwell. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. I think it's something very important that we think about, and thank you for bringing it to our attention. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to share some thoughts about the Burundara Stedford, if I may.
Please do.
Thank you. 2022 saw the return of the Burundara Stedford, and I'd just like to share with you some of the highlights and also take this opportunity to thank the participants, the volunteers, and also our wonderful staff in delivering what was an exceptionally good Burundara Stedford. So just a few fun facts and figures for the benefit of the council. So we delivered more than 105 hours of live competition, delivered this time in 2022 uninterrupted. It was our first complete program since 2019. And I'm proud to say that since 2019, we have had a 30% increase in growth since our last live delivery. That shows you the level of excited engagement that we received from our youth. 274 volunteer hours were put into the Eisteddfod, and as I said previously, I thank our wonderful volunteers for everything they did to make sure that we had an outstanding Eisteddfod. We've been able to use some of the new technology at the Hawthorn Arts Centre for the very first time, delivering high value to the Burundara audiences. For those of you who attended the piano concerto for the first time, they had a camera on the hands of the pianists, and then that was shown up on the screen. That was a privilege really only for those in the front row or looking from behind the shoulder, but now everyone could see it, and what amazing performers they were. Of the winner, it felt like the piano was just pulling the music out of his hands. It was just outstanding. So I thank everyone concerned and look forward to an exciting 2023. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and I think we should acknowledge the hard work you have undertaken as chair of that committee and the success you've produced for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth, your light, is it just on from...
Well, look, I actually just wanted to acknowledge Councillor Watson, which you've just done, but she has been an amazing inspiration to support the Eisteddfod, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Biggar, you had an item of general business.
I do, thank you. I note the question raised by Andrea McKenna in the public question time regarding the establishment of an LGBTQIA plus advisory committee, and this is something that has been raised with me previously on several occasions by members of the community. And given that the question of advisory committees is one for councillors to determine, and given the timing that we will soon be having discussions of councillor assignments and advisory committee determinations, I would like to ask that the issue of the possible formation of an LGBTQIA plus advisory committee be considered and discussed by councillors as a potential new committee and councillor assignment for the 2023 mayoral year. I'm not asking for a motion, but I would like to ask that be discussed.
Thank you. So I think we've noted that down. Thank you. Any other items of general business? No, thank you. Urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business? We'll move to confidential business. Are there any items of confidential business? Thank you, councillors. I can't see any, so that's the end of council business for this evening. So before we close the meeting, I wanted to thank all of you who have joined us this evening and wish you and your family good health. And I now declare the council meeting closed. Thank you, everyone.